Mr. Oza only brought her to our ashrama. Afterwards, and he brought Mr. Muthu Ganesh also. That time he was working in Dow Chemicals, structural engineer. Now he has shifted his profession. Like that, not only he used to come, he used to bring his with him his friends and well-wishers and introduced them to us. And when he was in service, he used to help many of our centers. We have got one center in near Uttaramerur called Mallian Karunai. When he came last time also to Ashrama, he was telling Swamiji we shall go to Mallian Karunai. It is about 80 kilometers from here, a rural center. And he was very fond of one Swamiji there, Swami Amurtanandaji. He was very close with him. And like that, he was having very close contact with all our Matan mission. Many senior Swamijis also know him. So in him, really, we have lost a great devotee and well-wisher and donor also. So may Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Sharda Devi and Swami Vivekananda and Almighty God bless those who have assembled here, and also bless Mr. Oza so that his soul rest in peace at the lotus feet of Almighty God. Yesterday I came across one Subhashitam. Subhashitam in Sanskrit. It is neighbor speaks, a small paper in Mambaram, Tinagar and Ashoknagar area it comes, recently started. Kavihi karoti kavyani rasam janati pandidaha taruhu srijati pushpani marut vahati saurabam. Kavihi karoti kavyani rasam janati pandidaha taruhu srijati pushpani marut vahati saurabam. Our school Sanskrit teacher has come here. He knows, he can understand better. Anyway, he'll read in Tamil. சுயநலமற்ற தன்மையே மனிதனை மனிதனாக்குகிறது, எல்லையற்ற அன்பு கொண்டவனாக ஆக்கிவிடுகிறது. இந்த அரிய பெரிய உண்மையை உதாரணத்துடன் விளக்குகிறது இந்த சுபாஷிதம். கவிஞர் பெருமக்கள் பலதரப்பட்ட காப்பியங்களையும் நாடகங்களையும் நவரசமும் சொட்ட சொட்ட வடிக்கின்றனர். ஆனால் அவற்றை அவர்கள் ரசிப்பதை விட பண்டிதர்களாக கற்றறிந்த சான்றோர்கள் நன்றாக படித்து அதிலுள்ள ரசங்களை சுவைக்கின்றனர். Say Kalidasa's Kavyas or any prose also. We read and enjoy the literature more than the authors. மரங்களில் பலவிதமான பூக்கள் மலர்கின்றன. அந்த பூக்கள் நறுமணம் கமிழ பூத்து குலுங்குகின்றன. அந்த நறுமணத்தை மரங்கள் அனுபவிப்பதே இல்லை. வீசும் காற்று நறுமணத்தை சுமந்து கொண்டு சுற்று வட்டாரம் முழுவதும் அவ்வாசனையை பரப்புகிறது. In our ashram we have maramalli. If you go just pass through, you get a beautiful fragrance like that. Senbagappu, Magarampu, like that. Those trees, if you go, you will get a sweet smell. But the tree itself does not enjoy those smells. இவ்வாறு கவிஞர்கள் மக்கள் மனம் மகிழ கவிதை புனைகிறார்கள். மரங்கள் தனக்கென்று சுயநலமாக எதையும் வைத்துக் கொள்ளாமல் சமுதாயத்திற்கு வாரி வழங்குகின்றன. தன்னலமற்ற சேவை ஒன்றே இறைவனை அடைய எளிமையான வழியாகும். மனிதனுக்கு செய்யும் சேவை கடவுளுக்கு செய்யும் சேவையாகும். சுயநலமின்றி சுகமாய் வாழ்வோம், பற்றுதலின்றி பரமனடி பணிவோம். விளக்குவரை வழங்கியவர் திரு பார்த்தசாரதி. Swami Vivekananda also says, unselfishness is God. So God, we all break our head, what is who is God and what is God? Swamiji just told in one sentence, Unselfishness is God. They alone live who live for others. டாக்டர் D.K.Oza இந்த ஸ்லோகத்திற்கும் சுவாமி விவேகானந்தரின் இந்த பொன்மொழிக்கும் சிறந்த ஒரு எடுத்துக்காட்டாக உதாரணமாக திகழ்ந்தார்கள். Once again, I pray to the Holy Trinity so that his soul rest in peace, and also the Holy Trinity bless us all on this Memorial Day. Thank you. Namaskar.
I now request the children of Sevalia to sing one of my grandfather's favorite bhajans, Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram. Sevalia is a long-standing charitable organization dedicated to aiding destitute people in need, including children in bonded labor, the vulnerable, and the very old. It was built on the principles of Gandhi and like-minded people, and is organization which my grandfather was a trustee of.
Good morning, everybody. Family members of Shri Oza, my distinguished colleague Vedanarayanan, who is here, Swamiji, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to speak at this event commemorating the memory of one of our greatest sons of this country, Shri Devendra Keshavlal Oza, whom I first met on 7th of May 1957, when our batch of IAS trainees were asked to report at Metcalfe House in Delhi, which was then the National Academy of Training for IAS Officers. We were a batch of 75 IAS officers and 15 Foreign Service officers. And Oza, when I met, I found in him great warmth and friendly feelings. In those days, people like us who were from the south and who had never an exposure to North Indian culture. In fact, the first such exposure was when I appeared for interview at New Delhi in the office of the UPSC. So the difference in the culture between the South and the North was visible even among the colleagues. Many of us from the South felt that the people from the North were different in culture, and there was a kind of a barrier between us. But a few people, the most important of that group being Oza, took the extra effort to extend a hand of friendship to us, and his warmth and love that he showed to us really helped to break the barriers that existed between the officers from South India and North India. I don't know whether it has been the same experience for other batchmates. Maybe Mr. Vedanarayanan could say about it, but it was very clear in our batch. And we had maintained a close relationship and a bond existed between us. But as the training was completed and we came to the state and went to the districts, our careers diverged. We were not in the same place. But again, we got an opportunity to be together for about a month in '59 when we had field training in settlement, and all of us came together. That was again a great opportunity to renew our friendship. Later, we have been keeping in touch, but I must admit, not that closely. He was very spiritually oriented, and we could see even at that time, he was not a no, I think about a year left. One day he called me and Chief Secretary. I said, "You're most welcome, come anytime." And he came, and we were talking about his own future plans. He said he was going to retire shortly, and he was thinking of going to Gandhigram Rural University as Vice Chancellor. I told him that as one of the senior most officers at that time, with an unblemished record like him, could in fact be entitled to any senior most position in the government. I said I would be more than willing to support him and talk to the Chief Minister about that. But he said he was not interested in his career with the government at that time, but more importantly, to pursue his Gandhiji's ideals of peace and communal harmony. I'd like to do whatever is possible for him, and said I'd be grateful if you can get the government to sponsor me for that position. I said I would happily do it if you have made up your mind. And he had made up his mind, and I spoke to the Chief Minister. It was all clear from the government side, and the other trust authorities of the Gandhigram Rural University were only very happy to take him, because here is a man with great administrative experience, at the same time devoted to the ideals of Gandhiji, for which that rural university was working. So there he was, and did a great job in the university, though I didn't have an opportunity to go and see it myself, but from all reports I heard that the rural university was making tremendous strides under his leadership. Gandhiji, besides his primary goal of attaining independence for our country, was keen to promote communal harmony and peace in India and abroad. Oza's tenure in the university whetted his appetite to work for promotion of peace and communal harmony. Jesus Christ, in his Sermon on the Mount, you find it in the book of St. Matthew, chapter 5, verse 9. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." Very aptly applies to Ozaji. The same thought is also reflected in an indirect manner in an old Sanskrit saying, "Loka samasta sukhinho bhavantu," which means, may all beings everywhere be happy and free. Unless there is peace, people cannot be happy. And that's a realization which had dawned in the mind of Oza very early in life. I am very happy to note from what Swamiji said, which I in fact was ignorant of his closeness to the Ramakrishna mission, and had imbibed the ideals of Sri Ramakrishna. I have myself been a great admirer of the work of Ramakrishna mission, right from the days when I was Joint Secretary in Government of India, looking after the welfare of children and nutrition, and I had extended support to hundreds of homes run by the Ramakrishna mission for children. And I had visited many of them and found them to be extremely well run compared to others. And I've had also the privilege of being a participant in many lectures of Swami Ranganathananda. And I also, when I was acting as Governor of Bengal, had the opportunity to visit Belur Mutt and see Sri Ranganathananda himself, though I met him before, but I was told he was suffering from a stroke. But I said, let me at least go and see the place in Belur Mutt where he is living. But somebody went and told him that I was there. And within a few minutes, he came down walking from the upstairs, walking down the steps, and said, I'm so happy to see you. And we had at the when the United Nations was set up, everyone said, never again, never again a world war like that. Well, technically we haven't had a world war, but there have been civil strifes everywhere. And Oza realized the civil strifes result in so much of damage to people, property, and in particular to women and children. So he had always thought that women should come forward to mobilize people against internal strife. And towards that end, he had written a book, Civil War in 20th Century, which he presented to me when I went to see him once. And in this, along with his co-author, documented about 100 civil wars after that Second World War all over the world. And they're still raging. The latest is, of course, what you see in Sudan, but there are many others. These wars cause untold damage to the people's lives, and this was something which he was pushing for to resolve these conflicts by promoting the ideals of peace and communal harmony among people, racial disputes, all this. He brought light in that book, and I'm sure the book will carry this message to many people. I would like to draw your attention to the closing words in this book. He had actually quoted Mahatma Gandhi when he visited a Montessori school in England. And he had said, and I quote, "You have very truly remarked that if we are to reach a real peace in the world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with children." Very apt saying, which is true even today. The hope of our future generation are the children. Of course, I have had the privilege of working in the area of child development and promoting what is called today ICDS or Anganwadi scheme, which was developed by me when I was in Government of India. Today I'm seeing to so much of satisfaction. And it is a great thing that the role of women and children has been appreciated by Gandhiji and imbibed by Oza and practiced. As we remember Oza's life and work, let us all dedicate ourselves and work towards the lofty ideal of promoting peace, communal harmony, and understanding among all sections of population in the world. Thank you very much.
I humbly request Mr. Anthony Sami, President of the Worth Trust, to speak a few words about my grandfather. A few words on the Worth Trust. They have been pioneers in working with the differently abled people in various poor areas, aiding their inclusion and their empowerment. My grandfather has been associated with the Worth Trust for over 50 years.
வணக்கம். Mr. Rajendran, Swamiji, Natasha and Anuradha, and dear friends. I first met Oza some 50 years ago. He was then the collector of what was then called South Arcot district. And I had started working in the field of leprosy as a volunteer with the leprosy patients in close to Karigiri in North Arcot. And I was so impressed at the first instance itself by his simplicity. He was collector at Kadalur, and he had come to preside over the Vadathorasulur leprosy hospital, which was a tiny hospital. And it was so nice of him to have spent the time to make that very long journey to Vadathorasulur. Anyway, at that time I did not know that although I liked him from the beginning, that we would come into close contact. In the last 50 years, he has been such a benefactor of the organization I work for. And it has grown immensely in the last 60, 70 years mainly due to this one single person. I will give examples of how he was involved in work. Started children then and started helping these children. Is doing this and other social work, and the government has started evaluating foreigners as to whether it is necessary for him to live still in India or should go back to their own countries. He said this person was some brother, I think, said that he had left Ireland so many years ago and he has lost his parents, his immediate family, and nobody known to him was even alive. In all these 60 or 70 years, he had never been to Ireland back, and England, India was his own country, and he cannot go and survive in that. And Oza called this government man who was doing this evaluation and said, don't trouble this man. I don't know what else he did. He let this brother stay in that small village, Usalambatti or some village near Madurai, and continue with this work. I am telling this one example, I know 100 others. I know the day when he called the chairman of the Indian Overseas Bank and said, you remember I asked you for one request, a job for a driver, and I don't know what went off. The next time when I met Oza, I asked him what happened. He said, yes, he got the job as a driver. You know, his father is a leprosy patient. And this boy had been educated by a lot of other donors and good wishes. And now he has got a driving license and the whole family is supported by him. This is a kind of man Oza was, that no contact, no spending of time was too little for him to help others. Our organization itself benefited immensely by this. I give one example of this. Because we were working for purely disabled persons, making engineering parts and all, and making a profit, and with that supporting more disabled people, we were exempted from sales tax. So the products which we made were not charged sales tax, so we could compete with other industries and get into the engineering field. One wise government servant had a brainwave. This exemption order for sales tax is given for all the products made by this. But when you are making any metal part, you are also making scrap. We were also selling scrap. So he said, the scrap is not exempted from sales tax. And we have been selling scrap for the last 10 years. So you have to pay a penalty of so many lakhs and a tax of so many other lakhs. I went to Mr. Oza, said, this is it. What can we do? He said, don't worry. He took me to the director or whatever the chief executive of commercial taxes, another IAS officer, Mr. Syriac, and said, you know this man? Naturally, he said, I don't know him. Well, he is working for leprosy patients, and the work that we do, I will certify, is probably the best organization in our state. And he said, what's the problem? He said, this sales tax. Okay, it will be done, he said. And it was done because he went on meeting Mr. Syriac even without my presence and reminded him of the sales tax. Those some years ago, there were days of power cuts, and the chief electrical inspector to the government had imposed quotas for each organization. We also had our own quota, but one particular day we had exceeded the quota by 1 unit. So officer from the electricity board came and removed the fuses and said till the end of the month you cannot use. And we were making components for car manufacturers which were of critical. So what shall we do? Then the same day I phoned Mr. Oza. He said, come along. And the next morning, early in the morning, I drove from Vellore to Madras, and his door was opened for me, and went in and said, this is it. He said, and then he did some work, and after 10 minutes or so, he said, come along. Me to see, I think it was Mr. Padmanabhan, who was secretary of the electricity department in the government. He told him he comes from an organization doing the best service for disabled people. He said, Amapa, inna sullu poina, like that. Then he said, the factory has been out of power for. He said, what happened? Then I told him that we exceeded power by 1 unit. He said, Saripa, Nipo Nampatkara. And Oza said, what shall we do? The chief electrical inspector to the government is coming to my office today. I will talk to him. I said, okay. Then as we were going, the door was shut. Mr. Oza put his foot on the door before it closes and said, can I sleep tonight? He asked his officer. He said, Adha na sollittenappa, current. No, he is driving back to Vellore. Before he reaches Vellore, will his factory be connected? Sanjal Popa. You know, Mr. Oza was such good touch with the officers and all, but he was more than willing to do anything to use that contract and power to help these organizations. I had had a lot of opportunity to know about Oza. We had traveled together to Wardha when the All India Leprosy Conference was on. So I had ample time to talk to him about so many things. And I was wondering what made a Secretary of Social Welfare to travel to Wardha for a leprosy conference. His field of interest, as Mr. Rajendran said, was very wide. And each one, the persons he met, thought Oza was so interested in that particular subject and that particular area of work. No, he was not. He was great about so many other things of which I personally know. And like as I said, I also thought that he was so interested in my organization. Although he was, Even after he retired, he was an honorary consultant for us, recognized by the Swedish Red Cross as a most valuable contributor to the organization. And I don't think many of us would know about what Swedish Red Cross did in India or any other country in the world. But they have been involved in a lot of work, and Oza knew about each one of that activity and had been helping this their activities on this. And this recognition was not even reported in the Indian newspapers, for it was only one of the many awards he had received. Now, Swamiji was talking about his interest in Ramakrishna Mission. I would have never thought that he was so interested in Ramakrishna Mission. Now, like that, there are now Seva Samaj, he has been interested. And like that, many of us would know about the leprosy rehabilitation homes. This was thought as a project by the late Chief Minister Karunanidhi as a birthday project. And it was Mr. Oza, as Secretary Social Welfare, who got him interested in starting all these leprosy rehabilitation homes. He took Dr. Paul Brand from CMC and introduced him to the Chief Minister and told him what he has been doing in the field of leprosy. Then at the time, they were very worried about the leprosy patients with their bad deformities begging in all the temples, churches, and mosques, and being a nuisance to foreign tourists. So late Mr. Karunanidhi decided as a project to start 10 leprosy rehabilitation homes all over Tamil Nadu. And we were asked to run a engineering rehabilitation center in Paranur. The building was constructed in 3 months. Because that is the amount of interest Oza had fed on to the Chief Minister and started working with the leprosy patients in that work. And Oza went on, it was called beggar homes. He said, no, we must give some dignity to the people whom we are helping. So they called it leprosy rehabilitation homes. And doctors were placed, from the medical department were placed in each leprosy home. And it was a terrible problem to run this so-called leprosy homes because most of them have been beggars. But I am so impressed by this proverb. I am told that if your heart is so pure, you have Ganga on your thing. Thank you. Thank you, Bhanu and Natasha, for inviting me.
Now I call my mother Anu and my aunt Natasha to share family memories with the audience.
doesn't know how to do slideshow mode, I think. Okay, we'll tell him to take it off the projector. I do slideshow mode. Yeah. Can we do a full screen? Yeah. I think we can all safely say that no matter what the occasion, there will be some technical glitches. So just give us a minute to put that in full screen. I think it's this one, slideshow, right? This down here. No, this up. Before that. Yeah. Let me just introduce myself. Um, I am Mr. Oza's daughter, Natasha, and my sister Anu is seated in the front row. The first thing I want to say is that we are just simply overwhelmed by the number of messages that we have received, the number of people who have come here today, and we are deeply touched by the presence of each and every one of you, ranging from people who have known my dad in a professional capacity from 1957, like Sri Rajendran, to Swamiji, to family members, friends, and representatives from many different NGOs who are all here today. We thank you for celebrating his life. And we have heard a lot about the values that drove him. And what I want to do is, I want to share with you, as a daughter, some of the things that he and my mother gave to us as our parents, and how there were certain common threads in his life that resonated throughout his life. And I hope to share with you some family pictures. Let me start by saying that my father very much lived his life grounded in Gandhian ideals. He derived a lot of spiritual sustenance from the Ramakrishna mission, from Sri Ramakrishna, Sharadamani Devi, and Swami Vivekananda, and he remained a lifelong supporter of the mission. In fact, my mother had studied in Sharada Vidyalaya. He derived spiritual satisfaction, but he also gave the mission his time, energy, and support, as Swamiji has remarked. He had a long, distinguished career as an IAS officer, 1957 batch, and he was most well known for being the Chief Electoral Officer of the state and Additional Chief Secretary to the government. He also had numerous other interests and was a Gandhi scholar, served as the Vice Chancellor of Gandhigram Rural Institute, which is today a deemed university. He taught at Portland State University in the US for 6 years, somehow concealing the fact that he did not have a PhD. He was invited to teach Gandhian philosophy and modern Indian history because he impressed the professors at Portland State so much with his wide knowledge. And it was a source of great amusement to us that he was not a traditional academic, nevertheless had a rich academic career. He published 2 books, one on civil wars, which Mr. Rajendran referred to, which was published 2 years back, and one on voluntary movements in India with a Gandhian approach to building people's movements. And we have placed both the books outside on the table, and please take a copy of each book. Most importantly, I would say, he cared deeply for the most vulnerable. Children, refugees, the differently abled, women, and his NGO work, which was wide-ranging, covered training, job creation, education of children, and women's empowerment. In fact, the only group of people for whom he had no patience was Chennai auto drivers. Apart from that, he was very much in favor of, as many have remarked, whoever he met and interacted with and gave his attention to. As a daughter, I can tell you that beyond his distinguished career, he also lived his life with great zest. He was a wonderful father and grandfather. He loved children. With my mother, Dr. Sushila Oza, he built a wonderful family life, of which I will talk a bit more. He loved dogs and horses. He loved riding. He trekked in the Himalayas. He played hockey at the state level in Gujarat. He was a bridge champion. It seems like he had an endless list of interests and accomplishments. And he loved poetry, classical music, literature, art. I'll tell you a little more about how I got the name Natasha in a little while. But he was very much a person of very wide-ranging interests. How do I go to the next slide? Okay. No problem. So my father was born in Ahmedabad, Gujarat in 1933. His father was the Diwan of a princely state, Valbhipur. And my father spent his childhood in several small towns in Gujarat. A typical young boy. He would go swimming in the river. He and the other boys would pick jamuns and mangoes. They would go to the temple. The priests would chase them away. In other words, very typical childhood of the time. They attended the village school. He was one of 7 siblings. And there was one teacher. It was Gujarati medium. And the teacher taught all the classes. In this family picture, you'll see my father in the middle. He's a little boy in the middle and has a very typical expression on his face, which was present in all his future photos. But even in the midst of this idyllic childhood, my father was learning lessons that would stay with him throughout his life. One of the things he learned was compassion. His own father was a Diwan and also served as a magistrate. And there was a time when he had given a thief a very light sentence. And my father asked my grandfather why, to which he said, if a man is genuinely remorseful, it's important to give him a second chance. So he learned the value of forgiveness and compassion. He also learned that my grandfather was a stickler for work, very hardworking. He was a trustee of the Bilkha ashram in Gujarat. And my father learned that over and above your job, there are commitments to public service that are part of a valuable life. Beyond that, he also learned from my grandmother. She was very progressive. She insisted that his sisters get well educated, and 2 of my father's sisters became teachers. And he learned from that when women are educated, it opens up a wealth of opportunities to them. He remained a staunch advocate of women's rights and education all his life. India was not independent then. And the passion of the freedom movement had penetrated into his village. This was when my father became deeply interested in Gandhi, who of course was from Gujarat. My father remembers marching in a Quit India march at the age of just 9 in 1942 wearing a Gandhi cap, and he loved wearing his Gandhi cap. There he is. He's older than 9 in this picture, but he's still wearing his Gandhi cap. There were other things happening. The Second World War was going on. In 1945, a boy from his village was killed in the Battle of Imphal. This was the last battle of the Second World War, and the tragic news was delivered to this boy's illiterate parents by the British Indian government. This made a deep impact on my father, and his hatred of war was rooted in the events of the time. At the age of 16, he moved to Ahmedabad. And there he noticed in 1947 that the trains from Sindh in Pakistan were coming into Ahmedabad. They were filled with refugees who had lost well-settled middle-class lives. My father was particularly shaken by the plight of the young women who often had to resort to desperate means just to support their families. These were formative experiences, and they made him someone who had a deep hatred for war, someone who believed in communal harmony and saw firsthand the effects of the partition of India. As I said, in Ahmedabad, he was continuing his schooling. He did not speak English at that time and was just learning it. But he loved literature all his life and could quote poetry extensively in English, Hindi, Urdu, and Gujarati. This was when he had an English teacher who told him poetry should be read with the ears. And that's how you get a feel for it. One of his favorite poems, and he could quote many, was Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But he Albert Einstein at the age of 21. This is my dad's letter to Albert Einstein. And astonishingly, Einstein replied, this letter is archived in the Einstein archives, my dad's letter, and we have the letter that Einstein wrote back. What you'll notice in my dad's letter is, and I quote, India is a country where some are rich and millions underprivileged. We want socialism. We want it non-violently. But fantastic poverty and inequality have forced many to believe that violence is necessary. Again, democracy is slow. What to do now? I must tell you that at the age of 21, he was showing already his deep love for India and his concern that millions were poor while some were rich, and how could we develop in a safe, stable fashion. I share with you Einstein's reply, and I quote here, "In the case of India, I would believe that a slower and peaceful development is possible and much preferable to a violent course." I must tell you that this letter lay in my father's cupboard, folded up in an envelope, until a few years ago we took it out and framed it. It's obviously a privilege to have this. Beyond writing letters to famous people, at some point he realized that he had to get a job, and this was when he decided to apply for the civil service. He had moved to Bombay by then, and Bombay was a fascinating city, full of libraries, beautiful beaches at the time, the opera house, movies, etc. He applied for the civil service, but he had not spent much time studying. Instead, he had spent a lot of time enjoying Bombay. So he made it to the Indian Postal Service, and then realized that his fate would be to be the Postmaster General, which he did not want. So he wrote the IAS exam, the civil services exam, the second time, at which point he passed and entered the IAS at the age of 24 in 1957. And this is a picture of the IAS badge, and I must ask Sri Rajendran if he sees himself here. So if I can figure out the pointer, my dad is here, right here. And you see here the President of India, Sri Rajendra Prasad. His first posting was in Vellore in Tamil Nadu. He had chosen Tamil Nadu as one of his choices because he was a very adventurous person, and Tamil Nadu had a reputation for being a very well-governed state. When he landed in Vellore in 1958, he was really a novelty. There were not many Gujaratis in Vellore. There were no people with the name Oza, definitely. And on his first day, they did not know what to make of him. So they thought he was a non-vegetarian and a Christian, and directed him to a military hotel for his meals and a church for worship. Of course, he had no idea what military hotel even meant, because that's a term that I think is just used in Tamil Nadu. But from those beginnings in Vellore, he became a stalwart officer with deep connections and love for Tamil Nadu, and made friends then, like Mr. Anthony Swami, that continued his whole life. In 1964, he decided to get married. He was always unconventional and was not willing to pursue an arranged marriage. He had two requirements: that his future wife would be a professional and that she would be from the south, since he was settled in Tamil Nadu. He placed an ad in the newspaper, and several ladies responded. And what attracted him to my mother was that she was composed, intelligent, and a medical doctor. Of course, my mother, Dr. Sushila Oza, always maintained that she had to marry him because, having obtained her MD, by that point, she had more qualifications than anybody in her own community, and therefore had a very limited choice of people that she could marry. My parents lived in Cuddalore early in their career, in my dad's career, where he was collector and he would walk to work every day. My parents had a very unique relationship of peers and created a cross-cultural family environment. We were the only children who had at home foods which were as varied as bhakri and khaman dhokla from Gujarat, to Andhra pappu from my mother, to rasam and dosas and idlis. My mother took great pains to learn enough Gujarati to understand conversations. And she also incorporated all the Gujarati dishes that she was able to learn into our daily menus. Because of their open-mindedness, they had a very rich social life. People of all backgrounds, religions, regions of India. And I think Sri Rajendran alluded to how these cultural barriers between North and South never applied with my father. My father would read late. He loved reading. He would read late into the night, and he loved, in particular, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Walden Pond by Thoreau, and Hemingway. In particular, he loved the book War and Peace by Tolstoy, and he also loved the movie with the beautiful actress Audrey Hepburn playing the title role. That's how I got my name, Natasha, from that book. You'll see in this picture of the four of us that the books far outnumber the people. Etc. Who attended that camp was so influenced that even 50 years later, they've written to us saying that this was one of the most formative experiences. And as they put it, it was not just what we learned, it was the attention that he gave us. As an adult, he took the trouble to create this for us kids. This is a group of boys who attended the astronomy session, and they got so carried away that they actually built a telescope. This was, of course, when they were about 14 or 15, many years ago. And this was his effect, that his attention and time as a busy person meant a lot to a lot of people. My parents did not differentiate in how they raised boys and girls. My dad taught us to play hockey, took us swimming, and focused a great deal on tree climbing. And my mother actually said that childhood is the time to learn these things. After all, there's plenty of time in the rest of your life to learn other things. And I have to say that this unique upbringing did give me a lot, but I remember when I was a graduate student in the US and had never learned to cook. I could not differentiate between tur dal and chana dal. Obviously an omission in my childhood. But as my mother said, there's always time to learn those things. My father also taught us the Bhagavad Gita. He was deeply influenced by it. It was a core scripture for him in how he lived his life, especially the idea of karma yoga. And he wanted his daughters to learn it directly from the Swamijis of the Ramakrishna Mission. So we used to have Gita classes where they would come and they would sing the Gita to us. And that's how we learned, my sister and I learned some of it. Of course, my father was a practicing Gandhian. In 1976, our housekeeper Meenamma joined us. She was a key figure in our family life. She adored my father. She would make special dishes for him. But both she and my mother disapproved of some of his Gandhian habits. He would wake up very early in the morning to spin on his charkha, and they were convinced that he was not getting enough sleep. He would also wear only white khaddar. Most of you have seen him in that. And he insisted on washing his own clothes, to which their objection was that in a city like Chennai, where we do not have enough water, you don't have the luxury of using 3 buckets of water to wash your clothes, especially if you insist on wearing white clothes, which have to be scrubbed well. Of course, this did not change my dad's mind in the slightest. He continued to wash clothes to the end of his life. After giving you this little bit of family background, let me talk a little about his career. As you know, he served as Chennai collector, also in social welfare, revenue and finance, and industry. He was the chief election officer, Tamil Nadu, for many years. This was not an easy position. The Election Commission has numerous responsibilities and has to rule on election law and on the behavior of parties and candidates. Such was his integrity and competence that all political parties insisted that he continue in this position, with the result that he served as chief election officer for many years. He conducted the elections after Mrs. Gandhi's assassination. This was a very fraught time in 1984, and the preservation of peace and harmony after an assassination was of great importance. These elections were conducted with no violence or disruption. He also pioneered the single-day election. Prior to that, elections were conducted over 2 days, but he was able to deploy both the police and reserves to secure all polling booths in the state. He also began the implementation of computerized voting machines and systems for the state. He was an authority on election law. Long after retirement, he was still consulted by the union government on matters of election law. He also conducted the state census, receiving the Census Medal of the Government of India. I want to share with you a moving quote from one of his section officers. When he announced the election results, he would congratulate the winners, and he would tell the losers to be happy that democracy had won. Of course, there were many lighter notes. The Tamil newspapers in particular loved to feature him on the front page, complaining about the strict rules of the Election Commission. One of our favorite headlines was when they referred to him as Ozawa Ziawa. This was when Zia-ul-Haq, of course, was in power in Pakistan. We took this in a good spirit. At one point, in fact, we had police protection on our house, but thankfully, nothing happened. Moving now to just a couple of points about my mother. My mother was a remarkable woman. She was as central to our family as my father. She worked for 3 years in Saudi Arabia, heading the Women's Health Center of a new hospital. My father would write to her every day. He also used this opportunity to get a dog, claiming that since she was away, my sister and I needed to have a dog to protect us when he was traveling. My mother had a wide circle of friends as well. As a senior gynecologist, she also was a counselor to many women on issues of health. She was so dedicated to her patients that she would not avail of her casual leave. In fact, her leave would lapse. And she was also equally admired by both her patients and her nurses And as you know, nurses are tough evaluators of a doctor. She always had a lot of respect from her nurses. And most importantly, she extended the warmth of her home to my sister and I, our friends, throughout our lives. With that, I'm going to hand this off to my sister, who will talk a little bit about the rest of my dad's career at Gandhigram, etc.
Thank you very much, Natasha. So let me conclude as quickly as I can. Coming back to my father's career, in 1991, he became the Vice Chancellor of Gandhigram Rural University, which was founded on the principles laid out by Mahatma Gandhi for rural education. Dad was able to establish numerous new academic programs, expanded sports facilities, and increased the enrollment of girl students. One of his aunts was especially angry with him because he used to play hockey with the students, and my aunt felt it was not becoming of a vice chancellor status to actually play hockey with the girls teams and the boys teams. Needless to say, my father did exactly as he wanted. One of his proudest achievements was building 60 houses in fallow land for Dalit families. A few days before he passed away in Mumbai, in my house, he talked about this to my sister also, as saying the work has been done. In 2014, he traveled to Atlanta, USA to visit the Martin Luther King Center. Martin Luther King had derived many ideas about civil disobedience, as we all know from Gandhi. As part of this initiative, a Gandhi King Center was established by the Gandhigram Trust. Post-retirement, the pace of his work has increased rather than decreased. And he's been closely associated with many NGOs from his earliest days in Vellore, which Mr. Anthony Swamy had talked about, as well as the later years during his career. One of the NGOs closest to his heart was Reaching the Unreached in Ganguvarpatti. Many of my family members, including those from my husband's side, have also visited Ganguvarpatti and have been deeply moved by the work being done there. That's Brother James King. And Oza, my father was called Oza Tata. Probably the first time an IAS officer in his official role was actually referred to as Tata, but it was something that the children loved to call him. He also worked with the CPR Trust. Dr. Nandita had dropped in, and we thank her for dropping in. He worked with the CPR Trust on a number of environmental issues where he talked about people's participation in keeping forests fertile. He also worked in Polambakam on women's environment. Can you show the picture, please? And he also got the Swedish medal, the Swedish Red Cross medal for social work. Apart from that, he believed NGOs and voluntary movements had an important role to play in building the nation. He wrote his book on voluntary approach and the Gandhian movement, which you can pick up outside. My parents were doting grandparents to Anusya and Aditi, our children. Dad smuggled in yet another puppy into the household just to keep one of his granddaughters happy. In 2021, he published Civil War in the 20th Century, which Rajendran sir had talked about. This was the book that he actually began 40 years ago on the long train rides from Avadi to Chennai. What we remember most about our parents, I know that we are two people who've lost both parents, and that's incredibly hard. But I think what we remember most about our parents was their open-mindedness, their generosity, their integrity, and what fun they were. Our friends formed part of an extended family for our parents, and that is something we will always be grateful for. Many of our friends have therefore come in today. My dad in particular attracted attention wherever he went. He was taller than most people. He had an uncommon name. He always wore white khadi and spoke Tamil flawlessly. But he also Sanskritized Tamil, which is sheer sacrilege, by using words like irkolio and ukarangol and shigram shaparanga and things like that, which no one could understand. But apart from that, he spoke outstanding Tamil. Our parents have inspired us. While extremely accomplished, they remain simple at heart, leaving us their love for family, music, literature, and art.
Gratitude to Dr. Oza for all his contributions to this organization. When Mr. Anthony Sami was talking about a man afraid of going back to his country, fearing that he would not be allowed to return. After 2017, after James Kimpton's death, Dr. Oza was sharing with me that he was guaranteed him of his return if he goes to visit his parents or his native place, but Brother Kimpton would not budge into that because he made himself as Indian, or that small village called Kallupatti. He was proud to call himself as Kallupatti-karan. And therefore, in that way, the relationship began with James Kimpton and Dr. Oza. And I don't know when it started, definitely before he became Vice Chancellor of Gandhigram. And once Dr. Oza, he said, he suddenly landed in Boys Village where James Kimpton was there, and saw his library, and he was very much impressed by that, and then onwards he started. And officially he enrolled himself as a member of Reaching the Unreached Society in 1991, and in 1995 he became the vice president, and in 1915 he became the president of Reaching the Unreached. This organization works for vulnerable children and women, and he's also Dr. Oza's thought also in line with that, and therefore he loved to come to our organization for all the meetings. There used to be 3 meetings in a year, and he would travel all the way from Chennai, around it is 450 kilometers away to south, and he would travel and spend few days. And after when he became president, even that increased 5 times a year. And he would say, I just want to come and stay here and see what is going on, and so on. In that way, he was very much helpful and encouraging with his administrational abilities. And when he was president, and out of his own innovation and his own sacrifice, he started a reading room for public, and also he started a fund to reward the toppers in the school, and he started a music band for the children, and he built 6 houses for the poor. And when he donated this money, he specifically mentioned that these houses should go to the widows and so on. Once the houses were built, when he comes, he would go there and spend few hours with the family for whom the houses were built. And also he sponsored a borewell. So besides his administrational contribution, from his own sacrifice, he contributed these things. And to be in RTU is very close, is very happy to be in RTU. And he always used to say that RTU remains very closer to my heart, and therefore he made his visit as often as possible. And after this corona, after his knee replacement, he could not travel, and so much so our children and the staff started asking me, Oza Tata Paathu Romba Naal Aache, Oza Tata. As they fondly call him Tata, because they also call James Kempton Tata, and therefore they call him Oza Tata. And really, in that way, he was well connected with our children and with our staff. And when he was chairman, president, he would love to receive all the guests who come to RTU, the foreign guests. Mostly they land in Chennai. And even though they don't expect this service, but he would extend his help, going all the way to airport, receiving them and accommodating them in the hotel and so on. In that way, he was very hospitable to all the guests who come to RTU, and he was sort of bridge here remaining in Chennai to receive them here and to send them back to RTU, and when they come from RTU to receive them and then send them back to their country. And these are the administrational benefits that we received. Apart from that, I personally, through the interaction I had, is very, very soft spoken, because first time I'm there from 2008 onwards, for past 15 years. First time when I heard that Dr. Oza, retired IAS, was a chief election commissioner and vice chancellor and so on, I had a little fear. I was a bit, but when I talked first time to him, and everything was shattered. Everything was something different. Then afterwards, I loved to hear from him and spend time with him. Mostly, we spend a lot of time after lunch and after supper. And in that way, when I talk to him, it is a kind of inspiration. And the inspiration as a Gandhian, always talking about the peace movement, how the peace is interrupted, how it is damaged or challenged by various things and so on. And the thing is, whether something happens here in Tamil Nadu or India or across the world, anywhere it can be, but he would feel that. He would feel that something has to be done, or something we should take some initiative to change the situation and so on. In that way, his whole his thirst for peace was incredible, and therefore I really. I'm really very happy to be connected with Dr. Oza and with his family members, and really his loss was very great for us, for the RTU family, reaching the unreached family. But at the same time, we nourish and cherish all his values, all his contributions, and certainly with his supporting guidance from above, we are sure we would proceed further in his footsteps and in the Gandhian way. Thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you.
All of you know his work, his family, his values here in Tamil Nadu. But back home, in home state also, he meant very much to all of us and the state too. And I thought I will share this about the home state, which many of you may not know very much closely. And when I was making this presentation, can you go to the first slide, please? When I was making this slide presentation, I realized that this is not my voice or my thoughts alone, but something which my family and even Devendra Kaka would have wanted to share with you about his family, his upbringing, his home state. And so this is our collective voice of the family in Gujarat and even of Devendra Kaka. This is my grandparents' photograph, father and mother of Devendra Kaka. And my father has written about his parents this, and I'm sure even Devendra Kaka shared the same emotions and feelings about his parents, and I'll read it out to you. Our father, D.K.Oza, was born in 1895. Bapuji, as they all called him, told me that on the day he received news of passing matriculation examination in 1914, he was taking the family buffalo to drink at the water hole. After passing BA with honors, he studied law in the only law college at that time, far away from home in Mumbai, earning for fees by giving tuitions. After practicing law in Junagadh, Gujarat, he became the magistrate in Lakhtar state. Later, he became the treasury officer of Wakaner state and subsequently the Diwan of Lathi state in 1931 and the Diwan of Mansa and Valbipur states. This was till all the states were unified on India's independence. My mother, that is Devendra Kaka's mother, Savitri Ben too had completed matriculation in the year 1924 when women were not really going out of home in those days. She was very knowledgeable in Sanskrit and had the whole of Gita by heart. She left no stone unturned to see that all of us get the best of education and move ahead in life. This is why my one brother became an MD, another, Devendra, cleared IAS, and one became a professor in economics. My sisters too are postgraduates, and my father also was sent to England to study law. So the entire family was, the grandparents strived that they studied and get the best of education. This is the life that they grew up in when my grandfather was the Diwan. You can see the state band of one of the states where my grandfather was the Diwan, and the state carriage. And about this life my father shares, which even Devendra Kaka shared. Though Lathi was a small state, it was prosperous. There were carriages, fine Arabian horses, police band, etc. All of us brothers and sisters have grown up amidst this magnificence. Horse riding, horse races, etc. were not novel to us. We were familiar with the protocol to be followed in the state too from the early childhood. My father was in a position of power all his life, but on the day the states were unified and after retirement, He did not hesitate to go buy vegetables as an ordinary person. Simplicity, loyalty, and honesty are the three qualities that we all brothers and sisters learned from him, and this is why we have been able to lead our lives happily. The maternal side family of Devendra Kaka also had great influence on the education. My great-grandmother, in fact, put her daughter on a ship against opposition from our own community where, anybody traveling abroad were excommunicated. So about the maternal side family, my father and all his siblings, including Devendra Kaka, would want to share this with you. The role and good education on my maternal side family had an important influence on us and our education. Both my maternal uncle H.M. Trivedi and C.M. Trivedi were barristers, and an aunt a graduate when very few women in Gujarat studied at all. She went to London for further studies. My grandmother and my mamas were very fond of us, and so the children of the entire family could stay and study in their Ahmedabad home. We could therefore study without much expenditure because of this, and all of us could pursue higher studies. You can see Devendra Kaka's older brother in the photo on the right, being sent off to England to pursue his further education in medicine. He was a cardiologist. And great-grandmother, Devendra Kaka's grandmother, who was a matriarch and opened her house for the education of all her grandchildren in Ahmedabad. I'm sure all of you recognize Devendra Kaka, very handsome from his very young days. With this kind of family values and education, Devendra Kaka and all his brothers and sisters were liberal, progressive, secular, feminists, and worked for the betterment of the society honestly, selflessly, and dedicatedly. Family motto of all the brothers and sisters: ask not what others or the country can do for you, but ask what you can do for others' country. And I'm very proud to say that our generation cousins, amongst the 11 or 12 of us, 6 of us have, I think, done MSW, and we are doing public work. So this values of doing social service we have inherited from our family. And I must say that Devendra Kaka, a small family secret I need to share here, that he was so good looking, so intelligent, so warm, so accomplished, that when he was studying in Ahmedabad, there were very many women who had lost their happy that happened. And this is the last slide I want to share, and this I want to share my feelings here. Devendra Kaka was very close to his home state and family, but as IAS does not encourage home postings, he left his home state, family, and all that he loved deeply when he was just a young man. And he dedicated his life in the service of the state of Tamil Nadu. In those days, distances seemed even more with no proper transportation and communication channels. Under such circumstances, Devendra Kaka missed his family and home state greatly, and so did his family in Gujarat. However, he made up for it by visiting and spending time with family in Gujarat and remained connected with even his nieces and nephews, whose company he enjoyed, trekking with some, sharing books with some, and discussions with some. We looked forward to his visits and loved spending time with him. He also missed the Gujarati culture greatly: food, language, literature. He particularly missed Gujarat, the land of Gandhi, and remained associated with Gandhian organizations, and often spent time at Gujarat Vidyapit, founded by Mahatma Gandhi himself in Ahmedabad. He did NGO work in Gujarat too, and was involved in rights-based work in the state of Gujarat as well. In the last couple of years, when it was difficult for him to travel, his spiritual connect with Gujarat grew stronger, and for every single day for the last year and a half, spoke with my mother on phone, exchanging prayers, spiritual notes, etc., particularly from the teachings of a family guru, Nathuram Sharma at Bilkha. This is how he remained connected with his roots. And today, when Devendra Kaka, who the entire family was not only very proud of but loved deeply, has gone really, really far away, we find him even closer to us and a family from Gujarat. Thank you very much.
We now conclude with my grandfather's favorite shlokas from the Bhagavad Gita to be read out by my aunt Natasha, and I request the children of Sevalya to sing his favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Janato, after.
I have already remarked how closely my father was connected with the Bhagavad Gita and how much strength he derived from it. He modeled the concept of Karma Yoga and service. And in this time of loss, some of the Krishna about the nature of the Atman. The Atman is eternal. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayanti apo, na shoshyati marutaha. Weapons cannot cut the Atman. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot wet it. And wind cannot dry it. It is a comfort to us to believe that the Atman is eternal and that we have not lost him, because the Atman is eternal, unchangeable, and cannot be comprehended by us unless we are spiritually realized. The second shloka, which in fact Swamiji himself quoted, was also very dear to his heart. Karmanye vadhika raste, ma phaleshu kadachana, ma karma phalar hetur bhurma, te sangostva karmani. You have the right to work, but not to the fruits of your actions. Do not let that become your motive, and do not let your attachment become to inaction. The concept of a karma yogi is one who lives his life through action in a spiritual fashion. And the final shloka, which was very dear to him and which he repeated frequently in the last 2 years of his life, in particular after the loss of my mother, was Uddhare datmanatmanam na atmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. Elevate yourself through the power of your own mind and do not degrade yourself. For your mind can be your friend and your mind can also be your enemy. He expressed this to us as you are your own best friend and you are your own worst enemy. Make sure that the aspects of you which are the better ones are the ones that shape your life. With that, I would like to thank you all very much for your presence. Again, we are deeply touched and overwhelmed by the number of people who have come, by the warmth, kindness that you have shown. And I think our last item is a bhajan, Vaishnava Janato, which was my father's favorite. It is written in Gujarati by the Gujarati poet Narsi Mehta. So the children of Sevalya will be singing that. Thank you.
Once again, thank you everyone for coming. Your presence here has meant a lot to us. We now break for lunch. Please feel free to pick up the copies of my grandfather's books that were placed outside. Thank you. Have a good day.